So I woke up, checked out the worm bin, and ran into a new problem. The worms, instead of escaping out the top, the mass exodus was going right through the holes in the bottom. The bins, when you make them, they have holes in the bottom, so it's meant so the worms can travel up and through the bin as the bottom becomes castings and the top becomes food. And I'll go over that in a later video. But anyway, my worms have decided that would be a good route to escape. I probably had about 20 or 30 worms in the water collection bin or the worm tea bin. And no water, no worm tea, but lots of worms. So I put them all back in the bin and decided, I think the problem is the worms I got was European night crawlers, and they like to have maybe about a foot, maybe 18 inches worth of dirt, and this is probably only about 8 inches deep right now. So I think they're looking for maybe a little more solitude, I guess you could say. But anyway, what I've decided to do is I've got me a big Rubbermaid bin, and I'm going to mix this dirt in with the Rubbermaid bin and make it a little bit deeper. And so it should be about a foot worth of bedding, and this should give them more room to move around and, well, get comfortable. So anyway, what I did this morning is I took a bin without holes in it, filled it full of peat, that's what you're looking at now, and I took it outside and filled it full of water, let it set for 2 or 3 hours. Started mixing it together. Really surprised me how dry the bottom still was. I mean, it was literally, I break some clumps up there that had absolutely no water in them at all, so I'm mixing them together real well now. I'll go ahead and add newspaper. I'm going to do a little thicker on the newspaper this time because I think that helps bring oxygen into the dirt. And I'm going to add more newspaper as I go, so it's not going to be just a dirt bin. Slowly it's going to be about a 50-50 ratio, I think, as I mix more in there. So and I'll show you as I go on that, but right now I'm just mixing in the dirt, and I'll bring the newspaper in just a little bit and add that to the mixture. So what I missed when I started all this is I didn't show you how I made the worm bin to start, so I thought since I'm redoing a worm bin, I'll go ahead and show you what I'm doing there. This is just a Rubbermaid bucket like I mentioned, and I'm going to drill a whole bunch of holes right in the bottom here. What the holes are for is as you add fruit and things like that into the bin, naturally the moisture in those will first be absorbed in the dirt, but because you've already got moist dirt, some of that moisture will go through the dirt and out the bottom. So it makes it so it doesn't get too wet inside the bin. It gives it a little bit of a drying out, if you will. And what else it's going to do is as the worms work through all of the bedding and the food that you give them, slowly they replace all that with worm castings. It's just a fancy word for worm poop. And as it gets primarily castings, you're going to harvest these castings. And the way you do that is you take a bin just like this. You've done the same thing, drill the holes in the bottom, and the worms will, then you start putting the food in the top bin, and the worms will go right through those holes into the top bin and start eating that food. And once they've all established themselves in the next bin, you can take the bin below out, harvest those castings, and you just keep that cycle going with 2 or 3 bins. And so I'm going to drill a whole bunch of holes in here. I'm going to just guesstimate that I've probably put 100, 150 holes in the bottom of this bin. And once I get that done, I will go ahead and add the dirt. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few holes along the side, strictly for air. It's not an escape route in case of a fire for the worms or anything. Worms are just like any other creature. They have to have air to breathe, and so when I snap the lid on tight, I want to make sure they can breathe. Hopefully it won't sneak out these holes, but even if they do, I guess it's survival of the fittest. So I added a few of those. I'm just cleaning up the little burrs that the drill left, and we'll go ahead and line it so we can add some dirt. So to line it, there's a bunch of holes in the bottom, and so I want to line it with newspaper so that 1, the dirt won't go out, and 2, as the worms are getting comfortable, I don't want them to sneak out the holes in the bottom. And so I wet in it just so that it's easier to form along the bottom, and it's just easier to work with wet newspaper as it is dry. I'll put 2 sheets on both sides, and I take 1 sheet, I fold it in half so it's a little bit thicker. And see, I'm using the Sunday comics there, give them something to read. But kind of moisten it up there, and then I'm going to take the dirt and I'm going to go ahead and just dump my big old bin of dirt right in on top of that. And from there I will go get the worms and I will add the worms on top. So for most of this video, have it sped up so you can see the whole video, but not be bored just sitting there watching me play in the dirt and hearing me talk. And so for this part, I'm going to actually slow it down, especially when I dump, just so you can see if you can see the live worms as they go down in. It really surprised me how lively they still are. I was a little bit worried that because they were all trying to escape, maybe they were dying off or something. But very happy to find that they are still all very much alive. So what you just see me toss in there right before I disappeared is I tossed in a couple of road apples, horse manure. Reason for it is I think that bacteria will help the process speed up a little bit for the worms, make them feel a little bit more at home, and get the composting starting just a little bit faster. I don't know that it's anything that I read, just kind of makes sense to me. So right now I'm just going to stir that in a little bit before I add those worms on top. So what the rubber glove is for is I'll stick my hand in the dirt for most things, but road apples, yeah, not so much. Now the newspaper on top of the worms, what that is for is to just keep them moist. I keep them in the basement without a lid because the light keeps them from going on. But can you see the worms in there? I'll go ahead and slow it down here so you can see the worms a little bit better. So just watch as these drop down in. Some of it is newspaper, but you can definitely tell there's worms in there, and not just a few, but there's a lot. I think my first mistake in this first round of doing worms is my bin was way too small for this many worms, especially when I re-look at this video. And so going to the large bin is probably a really good idea on this. And so I'll probably buy a second bin this size when I'm ready to start harvesting the castings and have them kind of go up through the bin in a larger bin like this. So I just kind of clean out the rest of the dirt, and you can see in the bottom where I have the newspaper on that, but they were just going right up around that newspaper alongside and into the holes in the bottom to escape. So what else I decided to do is that newspaper on the bottom is pretty moist, and a little bit of decomposure, I guess you could say, already started on that. So I decided to use that as my top piece to kind of cover the worms. I cover the worms to keep them out of the light because the worms hate the light, but then to keep them from escaping out of the bin at night especially, I leave the light on just above them downstairs, just a little fluorescent light, so it's not costing a lot of money. That keeps them inside the bin until they get used to their home, and hopefully they'll stay in. So I want to finish up here with just a few snapshots showing you how I kind of laid up the tub. So this first picture is just how I laid out the newspaper. That was just to stop the dirt, like I said, from going through the bottom, and kind of to talk the worms from out of going through the holes until they get used to their bed. This next shot is just kind of a top shot of the dirt, so you can kind of see how full I did the tub, and here's a shot of where I did just kind of the side, so you can see how high I went from the top. Now remember, I'm adding another 3 inches on top of this of worms, and so it'll be a pretty full bin when I'm done. It might even be too full, but I think I'd rather have it too full than not full enough and have them all trying to escape. So if you've appreciated this video, please subscribe to my YouTube and visit my Facebook page. It'll be listed at the bottom. Now before we finish up here, I do want to add one more thing, and that's the improper way to add water to your worm bin. So watch closely, and this is what not to do. So again, thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel.